The pen felt unnaturally heavy in my hand as I stared at the documents my husband had just slid across the cream-colored linen tablecloth. Around us, 40 pairs of eyes watched with curiosity. Our baby shower guests suddenly an audience to what Jack had orchestrated as my public surrender. "It's just a formality, Jess," he whispered, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "For the baby's future." But what he really meant was, sign over your multi-million-dollar company while everyone watches, so you can't possibly say no. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I glanced around the room at the expectant faces of his family, the confused expressions of my friends, and the calculating look in my mother-in-law Catherine's eyes. 7 months pregnant, surrounded by blue decorations for the son I hadn't told anyone I was having, I felt the weight of the moment crushing down on me. This was the culmination of months of planning. Their planning, not mine. "I need to use the restroom," I said quietly, rising with effort from the ornate chair they'd positioned me in. "The baby is pressing on my bladder." 20 minutes later, I returned to a completely different room. My security team, professionally dressed men and women who had been disguised as caterers and gift handlers, were now stationed at every exit. Jack's face had transformed from smug certainty to dawning horror as I picked up the documents, tore them in half, and announced to the room, "This event is over, and so is our marriage. Now, let me take you back to how it all began, and show you exactly how I discovered my husband's betrayal, and why having a contingency plan saved everything I'd worked for." 3 years before that baby shower, I was Jessica Wilson, founder and CEO of SecureFrame, a cybersecurity startup that had just secured its Series B funding. After years of being the only woman in rooms full of male investors, developers, and security experts, I had finally built something that was changing the industry. My patent-pending security protocol had caught the attention of major financial institutions, and we were scaling faster than I had ever imagined possible. That's when I met Jack Taylor at a tech conference in Austin. He approached me after my keynote speech, all 6 feet of him impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that screamed old money, something my self-made status had never prepared me for. "Your approach to quantum encryption is revolutionary," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Jack Taylor, CFO of Meridian Technologies. We should talk about potential synergies." Jack wasn't like the tech bros I was used to dealing with. He had an MBA from Wharton, came from 3 generations of business leaders, and moved through the world with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work, not just as a potential acquisition, but as an innovation he respected. Our business meetings turned to dinners, dinners turned to weekend trips, and 6 months later, I found myself falling for a man who appeared to be my perfect complement. He understood the demands of my schedule, never complained when I took late-night calls with international clients, and proudly introduced me to colleagues as the brilliant mind revolutionizing cybersecurity. The first hairline fractures in this perfect picture appeared when he took me to meet his family in their Lake Forest estate outside Chicago. Catherine Taylor, with her perfectly coiffed silver bob and tennis-toned arms, assessed me like I was a company to be acquired rather than a potential daughter-in-law. "Technology is such an interesting hobby," she said over drinks on their lakeside terrace, "but surely you'll want something more fulfilling eventually." When I explained that SecureFrame was actually my 3rd successful company and that cybersecurity was my lifelong passion, she smiled tightly and changed the subject to Jack's second cousin, who had just been appointed to a corporate board. Her first, of course, but the Taylors have always balanced business with family obligations beautifully. Jack squeezed my hand under the table but said nothing to contradict his mother. Later, when I mentioned her dismissiveness, he laughed it off. "Mom's from a different era," he said, kissing my forehead. "Give her time. Once she sees how amazing you are at everything you do, she'll come around." I believed him because I wanted to. Because when he proposed 6 months later with a family heirloom ring and promises of a partnership of equals, it seemed like the perfect merger of hearts and minds. The tech world's power couple, him with his financial acumen, me with my technical innovation. Our wedding was featured in both Chicago Social and Tech Innovator magazines. Catherine insisted on handling most of the arrangements, overruling many of my preferences with comments like, "Darling, the Taylors have always done things this way." Again, Jack played peacemaker rather than advocate, so I compromised to keep the peace. Marriage is about choosing your battles, my mother had advised during a rare moment of wedding planning she was permitted to participate in. A public school teacher who had raised me alone after my father died, she seemed both awed and concerned by the world I was marrying into. "Just make sure you're not the only one compromising, Jessie." The red flags continued to wave, but I was too busy growing my company to fully process them. SecureFrame had just landed our first government contract, which meant intense scrutiny, security clearances, and scaling our team from 40 to over 100 employees in 6 months. Jack was supportive during this period, offering business advice when asked and proudly attending industry events as Jessica Wilson's husband. He had agreed I would keep my professional name for the sake of company continuity. Then came the pregnancy, unplanned but not unwelcome. I was 34, established in my career, and while the timing wasn't ideal with our international expansion underway, Jack's excitement was contagious. "A son," he said confidently, though we hadn't yet had any tests. "A Taylor heir to continue what we're both building." His sudden focus on family legacy seemed sweet at first. He converted our home office into a nursery, researched private schools with feeder paths to Ivy League universities, and started talking about a summer home near his parents where the children can experience the same lakeside summers I had. It was during my second trimester that I noticed subtle shifts in his behavior. Jack began stopping by my office unannounced, sitting in on executive meetings as an interested observer and asking detailed questions about SecureFrame's operational structure. As CFO of Meridian, he understood the value of what I had built, a company now valued at just over $200 million, with projections to hit $500 million within 3 years if our new security protocol performed as expected. "Have you thought about our management structure once the baby comes?" he asked one night over dinner. "You'll want to scale back, at least initially. Perhaps we should discuss bringing in a COO who could eventually step up if needed." His concern seemed reasonable on the surface. Many founder CEOs did restructure after major life events, but something in his tone triggered my well-honed instincts, the same instincts that had helped me identify security vulnerabilities others missed. "I've already worked with HR on a comprehensive maternity plan," I replied, watching his reaction carefully. "Maya will step up as interim CEO for 3 months, but I'll be maintaining strategic oversight and board responsibilities throughout." Jack's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Maya's very technical, but the company needs strong financial leadership at this stage, someone with experience managing investor relations and planning for long-term growth." "Someone like you?" I asked directly. He laughed, reaching for his wine glass. "I'm not saying that. But someone with my background could complement what you've built. We're a family now, Jess. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. It makes sense to start thinking of our professional lives the same way." The conversation shifted to other topics, but his words lingered in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying months of subtle comments and suggestions that suddenly formed a disturbing pattern. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do in my marriage. I initiated a security protocol. As a cybersecurity expert, I had always maintained strict boundaries between my personal and professional digital lives. Jack and I had separate personal devices, though we shared passwords for practical purposes. But secure frame systems were accessible only through secure channels with multi-factor authentication that even my husband couldn't access without my knowledge. Or so I thought. Using a private laptop with specialized monitoring software, I began tracking system access across our corporate network. 3 days later, I had my first piece of evidence. Someone had accessed our secure server using my credentials from an unrecognized device during hours I had been at a doctor's appointment, with Jack supposedly in meetings across town. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rather than confront him immediately, I laid a trap. I created a digital breadcrumb trail, a folder of seemingly innocuous financial projections with embedded tracking code that would allow me to see exactly what happened to the files if they were downloaded, forwarded, or printed. Within 48 hours, those files had been copied to an external drive and opened on a computer registered to Meridian Technologies. Specifically, on the executive floor where both Jack and his father, George Taylor, had offices. The betrayal cut deep, but my technical training kicked in. This was now a security incident, and I would handle it methodically, gathering evidence before taking action. I implemented enhanced monitoring without alerting our IT team, using personal tools I'd developed years ago for detecting sophisticated intrusions. What I discovered over the next 2 weeks shattered any lingering doubt. Jack had been systematically accessing confidential company information, client contracts, intellectual property documentation, organizational charts, and financial projections. More alarming were the emails between Jack and his father discussing the integration of assets and management restructuring post-acquisition. They weren't just stealing information, they were planning a complete takeover. The final piece fell into place when I discovered calendar invitations for meetings between Jack, his father, and their family's longtime legal counsel. Meetings scheduled during the elaborate baby shower Catherine had insisted on hosting at our Chicago penthouse. The invitation included an attachment labeled Transfer Agreement Final.pdf, which, when I accessed it using recovery tools, revealed the document Jack would eventually slide across the table in front of all our guests, papers that would transfer controlling interest in Secure Frame to Jack, with provisions for parental leave that would effectively remove me from leadership permanently. The baby kicked hard against my ribs as I read through their plans, as if sensing my distress. I placed a hand on my swollen belly and made a promise to my child and myself. They will not take what I've built. Not from me, and not from you. I had 3 weeks until the baby shower, enough time to implement a counter-strategy that would protect everything I had worked for. My first call was to Diane Chen, my personal attorney who had no connection to the firm that handled Secure Frame's legal matters, which I now realized had been Jack's suggestion 6 months earlier. "We need to move quickly and quietly," Diane C. advised after reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. "These documents suggest they're planning to use your pregnancy and the emotional context of the baby shower to pressure you into signing. Classic duress scenario, but they've covered their tracks legally by framing it as a family business restructuring." My second call was to Maya Patel, my CTO and most trusted colleague since Secure Frame's founding days. Unlike my other executives, Maya had never warmed to Jack, maintaining a polite but professional distance that I had previously attributed to her naturally reserved personality. "I've been monitoring some unusual system access patterns but didn't want to raise alarms without concrete evidence," she admitted when I shared my discoveries. "The activity originated from your credentials, and our security protocol is to never monitor the CEO's account without explicit authorization." Together with Diane and Maya, I developed a 3-pronged response plan: legal protection, business continuity, and personal security. We transferred key intellectual property into a newly created holding company that I solely controlled. We quietly implemented leadership contingencies that would keep Secure Frame operational regardless of what happened with Jack and his family. And most importantly, we engaged Eclipse Security, a firm specializing in executive protection that had provided security for several of our high-profile clients. The situation you're describing has both personal and corporate security implications, explained Rohan Kapoor, Eclipse's founder and a former cybersecurity specialist himself. We'll need to secure both your digital assets and your physical environment, especially during this baby shower event where they're planning to make their move. The plan we developed was comprehensive. Eclipse would provide plainclothes security personnel posing as event staff, caterers, and even a few guests who would be strategic plants within the shower attendees. Every room in our penthouse would be subtly monitored, and Eclipse's team would be prepared to escort unwanted individuals from the premises when I gave the signal. Simultaneously, Maya implemented a complete security protocol reset at SecureFrame under the guise of compliance requirements for our government contracts. Jack's backdoor access was eliminated without directly alerting him to our awareness of his activities. Diane prepared documentation of everything we'd discovered, creating both legal briefings for potential litigation and a simple, clear document, explaining the attempted hostile takeover that could be shared with our board and key investors if necessary. As the baby shower approached, I maintained a facade of blissful ignorance, exclaiming over Catherine's elaborate decorations, all blue, though we had decided not to learn the baby's sex, and appearing appropriately grateful for the special surprise Jack and his parents had planned. The morning of the shower, I met with Eclipse's team for a final briefing in a coffee shop several blocks from our penthouse. Rohan confirmed that 20 security professionals would be in position throughout the event, all connected via discrete communication devices and prepared to move on my signal. "Remember, Mrs. Taylor," he said, using my married name one final time. "Our priority is your safety and the safety of your child. The timing of your signal is entirely at your discretion. We will not act until you give the word." I returned home to find Catherine already directing an army of decorators, florists, and caterers, unknowingly allowing several Eclipse team members access as they arrived disguised as additional service providers. Jack was surprisingly absent, having mentioned a quick stop at the office to handle something that couldn't wait. Cell phone tracking software I had installed the previous week showed his actual location, his father's estate in Lake Forest, presumably for a final strategy session before their big move. I used the hours before the shower to center myself, changing into the pale blue maternity dress Catherine had selected. Taylor women always wear blue for baby boys, tradition is important. And reviewing my mental checklist one final time. By the time guests began arriving at 2 o'clock, I was calm in a way that only comes from absolute certainty about the path forward. The shower proceeded according to Catherine's meticulously planned schedule. Elaborate games celebrating the Taylor family legacy, a catered lunch featuring Jack's favorite foods rather than mine, and a gift-opening ceremony where Catherine handed me each package with commentary about how the Taylor family had used similar items for generations. All the while, I noted the positions of Eclipse's security personnel, the bartender with military posture, the photographer's assistant scanning the room rather than focusing on photos, the caterer who had positioned herself near the main entrance, with clear sight lines to all approaches. At precisely 4:30, Catherine clinked her crystal glass for attention. Right on schedule. "Before we continue with dessert," she announced, "Jack and his father have a special presentation for our mother-to-be." Jack appeared from our home office, followed by his father and a man I recognized as Walter Simmons, the Taylor family's longtime legal counsel. Jack's smile seemed genuine to anyone who didn't know him well, but I caught the calculating look in his eyes as he approached with a leather portfolio in hand. "As we prepare to welcome the newest member of the Taylor family," Jack began, addressing the room of 40 guests, "we wanted to formalize some arrangements that will secure little Thomas's future." He placed a hand on my belly, having never discussed or agreed upon that name. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd as Jack knelt beside my chair, opening the portfolio to reveal the documents I had already reviewed in their digital form weeks earlier. "These papers will bring SecureFrame under the umbrella of Taylor Family Holdings," he explained, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's a formality that ensures our business interests are aligned as we become parents, something my father did for my mother, and his father before him." He held out an elegant fountain pen, a Taylor family heirloom, I realized from the crest engraved on its side. His expression was expectant, confident, with just a hint of warning in his eyes that only I could detect. The room had gone silent, all attention focused on this moment of supposed marital unity and tradition. Catherine stood behind Jack, her smile triumphant as she watched what she clearly expected to be my capitulation. The pen felt unnaturally heavy as Jack placed it in my hand. I glanced down at the documents, noting the sections highlighting my new advisory role and the complete transfer of voting rights to Jack as family trustee. "It's just a formality, Jess," he whispered, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "For the baby's future." I took a deep breath and set the pen down beside the documents. "I need to use the restroom," I said quietly. "The baby is pressing on my bladder." Before anyone could object, I rose with effort from the chair and walked unhurriedly to our master bedroom. Once inside, I sent a simple text to Rohan. "Execute Phase 1. I took exactly 15 minutes to change out of the blue dress Catherine had selected, replacing it with a black maternity dress I had hidden in the back of my closet. I removed the diamond earrings Jack had given me for our anniversary, and instead put on the simple pearl studs my mother had worn on her wedding day. When I returned to the living room, the transformation was already underway. Eclipse security. Personnel had moved from their disguised positions to strategic locations throughout the space. Rohan himself stood near Jack, who was engaged in heated whispers with his father and their lawyer. Catherine rushed toward me, her composed facade cracking. "Jessica, what is the meaning of this? These people are disrupting our event." "This event is over, Catherine," I replied calmly. "I'd like all guests to leave now, with the exception of Jack and his parents." "You can't just—" she began, but Rohan stepped forward. "Mrs. Taylor, we are executive security professionals engaged by Mrs. Wilson for her protection. We need to clear this space of all guests immediately." The shocked expressions on the faces of Jack's family members confirmed what I had suspected. They had never imagined I would have the foresight or resources to counter their carefully orchestrated plan. As Eclipse personnel efficiently but courteously began escorting confused guests toward the exits, I approached the table where the documents still lay open. Jack moved quickly to intercept me. "Jessica, you're making a scene," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "Think about what you're doing." 2 security team members immediately flanked us. "Sir, please remove your hand from Mrs. Wilson's arm," the woman to my left said firmly. Jack released me, his face flushing with anger and embarrassment. "These are private family matters," he said, raising his voice for the benefit of departing guests. "My wife is under tremendous stress with the pregnancy." "Your wife," I interrupted, my voice steady, "has discovered your attempts to access secure company servers, your meetings with competitors, and your plan to use this baby shower as a public setting to pressure me into signing away my company." I picked up the documents and tore them in half, the sound sharp in the now half-empty room. "And your wife has filed for divorce as of 9 o'clock this morning." George Taylor stepped forward, his authoritative presence filling the space between us. "Now, see here, young lady. The Taylor family has been building businesses for generations. Whatever you think you've discovered has been misconstrued. Jack has only been acting in the best interests of your family unit. Is that why he copied proprietary technology specifications to Meridian servers?" I asked calmly. "Or why he scheduled meetings with Axelon Technologies, our direct competitor, 3 times in the past month? Or perhaps you can explain these emails discussing how to Leverage my emotional vulnerability during pregnancy to secure control of Secure Frame's assets. I nodded to Rohan, who produced a tablet displaying the evidence we had compiled. Jack's face went pale as he recognized his own words in the emails displayed on screen. "You hacked my accounts," he accused, voice shaking with rage. "That's illegal." "No, Jack. I implemented security protocols to protect my company from unauthorized access you initiated using stolen credentials. As a cybersecurity CEO, detecting and documenting intrusions is literally my job." Catherine looked between her son and husband, comprehension dawning in her eyes. "You idiots," she muttered. "You left digital trails?" Her immediate grasp of the situation confirmed another suspicion. Catherine had been aware of, if not actively, involved in, their plan all along. "Mrs. Taylor," Rohan said, addressing Catherine, "we have a car waiting to take you and Mr. Taylor Sr. home. Mr. Jack Taylor will be permitted 30 minutes to collect essential personal items before leaving these premises, supervised by our team. All other property matters will be handled through legal channels." "This is our home," Jack protested. "You can't just throw me out of my own property." "The penthouse is owned by J.S. Wilson Holdings," I corrected him. "It was never transferred to joint ownership, despite what you may have told your family. Check the property records." The realization of how thoroughly I had prepared washed over Jack's face. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked at me not as an acquisition target or a trophy wife, but as an opponent who had outmaneuvered him completely. As Eclipse Security escorted the elder Taylors toward the door, Jack made one final attempt. "The baby?" he said, his voice lower now. "That's my child, Jessica. You can't keep my son from me." I placed both hands protectively over my belly. "I have no intention of keeping this child from having a relationship with their father," I said evenly. "But that relationship will be defined by court-ordered visitation and supervised interactions until you demonstrate you can be trusted. And Jack? It's a girl." The shock on his face was the last thing I saw before turning away, signaling the end of both our conversation and our marriage. The coming months were challenging but clarifying. Jack contested the divorce on every possible ground. But the evidence of his corporate espionage and attempted hostile takeover created significant leverage in negotiations. Rather than risk criminal charges and professional disgrace, he eventually agreed to a settlement that included generous but supervised visitation rights after the birth, non-disclosure agreements regarding Secure Frame's technology, and a clean, financial separation that protected my company completely. My daughter, Eliza Grace Wilson, was born 6 weeks after the baby shower showdown. She arrived on her own schedule, just as I was finalizing Secure Frame's largest contract to date, a government cybersecurity initiative that would cement our position as industry leaders for years to come. Catherine made one attempt to contact me after Eliza's birth, sending an elaborate baby gift with a note suggesting we put aside differences for the sake of the child. The gift was donated to a women's shelter, and my response was polite but firm. Eliza would know her paternal grandparents only when they demonstrated the same respect for her mother that they would expect for themselves. In the year since that baby shower, Secure Frame has doubled its valuation and expanded internationally. Our security protocols are now industry standard for financial institutions worldwide, and I've launched a foundation supporting women in tech with emphasis on helping those leaving controlling relationships. Jack has visitation with Eliza twice monthly, always supervised as stipulated in our agreement. He is, somewhat surprisingly, an attentive father during these brief interactions, though he continues to work at his family's company and maintains the same social circles that once applauded his attempt to take what I had built. The Eclipse. Security team that transformed my baby shower has become a permanent part of Secure Frame's Executive Protection Division, with Rohan joining our board of directors and developing specialized security protocols for high-risk corporate transitions. The blue nursery that Catherine had designed in our penthouse has been repainted in shades of green and yellow. colors Eliza chose herself, in her own way, by consistently reaching for a stuffed frog and sunflower during her earliest months. Her room is filled with books about pioneers, inventors, and women who changed the world, along with the building blocks of future coding skills disguised as colorful toys. Sometimes at night, as I rock my daughter to sleep in the home that has always been mine, I think about the weight of that pen in my hand and the moment I chose to walk away rather than sign. How close I came to surrendering everything I had built to a man who saw my greatest achievement as something to acquire rather than something to respect. I tell Eliza in whispers that she'll face moments like that too. Crossroads where the easy path leads to surrender and the harder road requires standing firm. I promise her that I'll teach her to recognize those moments, to build her contingency plans, and to never confuse love with the surrender of her power. The security team didn't just change everything about my marriage that day. They helped me secure the future I wanted for myself and my daughter, one where we define our own legacy, protect what we create, and never hand over the pen to anyone who hasn't earned the right to shape our story. For the 6 months following my wedding to Jack Taylor, I remained blissfully unaware of what was happening beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect union. We settled into a rhythm that accommodated both our demanding careers, Jack as the CFO of Meridian Technologies and me as the founder and CEO of SecureFrame. Our Chicago penthouse became a sanctuary where we would decompress after long days, sharing industry gossip and strategic insights across different sectors of the tech world. In those early days, Jack seemed genuinely supportive of my ambition, often bragging to friends about my company's latest innovations or growth metrics. My wife is revolutionizing how Fortune 500 companies approach digital security, he would say, his arm around my waist at industry functions. The Taylor-Wilson household is going to dominate tech headlines for the next decade. I noticed he always placed his surname first in these declarations, but dismissed it as meaningless convention. After all, he had been nothing but encouraging about my decision to keep my maiden name professionally. Wilson is already a brand in cybersecurity, he had reasoned. It would be bad business to change it. The first significant shift came during a dinner with his parents at their Lake Forest estate, 3 months after our honeymoon. George Taylor, Jack's father and chairman of Taylor Holdings, brought up the topic of family business alignment over brandy and dessert. "Now that you're officially a Taylor," George said, swirling amber liquid in his crystal snifter, "we should discuss how SecureFrame might benefit from closer alignment with our family's business interests." Catherine, Jack's mother, nodded approvingly. "The Taylor portfolio has always maintained certain standards of cohesion. It's tradition." I smiled politely while explaining that SecureFrame operated in a highly specialized sector requiring strict independence due to our government contracts and international cybersecurity certifications. Of course, George chuckled, exchanging a look with Jack that I couldn't quite interpret. Just something to consider for the future. Family synergy has always been the Taylor advantage in business. On the drive home, I asked Jack about his father's comments. He brushed them off as typical dad talk, and assured me nobody expected me to compromise my company's autonomy. "He's old school," Jack explained. "In his day, marriages always meant merged business interests. Don't worry about it." But the conversation planted a seed of unease that grew as I began noticing patterns in the coming months. Jack gradually increased his presence at SecureFrame-related functions, offering unsolicited advice about our financial structure and suggesting efficiencies that would bring our operational model closer to Meridian's. He began dropping casual references to shared office spaces for our executive teams or potential technology integrations that would tie our systems together. "Imagine the cost savings," he would say, "and it would give me an excuse to see more of you during the day." The suggestion seemed romantic on its surface, but my instincts as both a cybersecurity expert and a businesswoman flagged potential boundary issues. Still, I reasoned that marriage required compromise and open-mindedness. Perhaps I was being too rigid about keeping our professional lives separate. When I discovered I was pregnant, these concerns temporarily receded into the background. The surprise of impending parenthood, something we had discussed as a someday plan rather than an immediate goal, consumed our attention. Jack was ecstatic, calling his parents before the pregnancy test had even dried completely. The tailor. "Legacy continues," he announced proudly, one hand on my still flat stomach. "Dad, you're going to be a grandfather." His enthusiasm touched me deeply. He downloaded pregnancy apps, researched the best obstetricians in Chicago, and began sketching nursery designs for our spare bedroom. Catherine immediately began sending heirloom baby items, silver rattles, hand-carved wooden toys, and a family cradle that had allegedly held 5 generations of Taylor firstborns. "We'll need to start thinking about preschool waiting lists," Jack said one evening, scrolling through his phone. "The right educational foundation is crucial for future Taylor executives." I laughed, reminding him that our child might have entirely different interests than business or technology. What if they want to be an artist or musician? Jack's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "We'll support their interests, of course, but core business education is non-negotiable in the Taylor family. My great-grandfather established the tradition. Every Taylor attends business school, regardless of their primary career path." As my pregnancy progressed and my belly began to show, I noticed subtle shifts in how both Jack and his family referred to my career. What had once been Jessica's groundbreaking company became your current project, or your work before motherhood. Catherine sent me articles about female executives who had stepped back from operational roles to focus on family, always with notes about how they found true fulfillment in this transition. "I've arranged for you to have lunch with Elaine Winters next week," Catherine informed me during her weekly visit to check on the pregnancy. Elaine, I learned, had been CEO of a retail technology company before marrying into another prominent Chicago family. She has such wisdom about balancing motherhood with staying involved in business in a more appropriate capacity. The lunch proved revealing, though not in the way Catherine had intended. Elaine, after confirming we were alone, leaned across the table with a seriousness that caught me off guard. "Listen carefully," she said quietly. "The Taylors approached my husband's family the same way before our first child was born. They're part of an old network of Chicago families who still believe in male-controlled business dynasties. They'll smile and talk about family harmony while systematically separating you from your company." I tried to laugh off her warning. "Jack isn't like that. He's always supported my independence." Elaine's expression remained grave. "That's how it begins. Supportive husband, proud of his accomplished wife. Then pregnancy becomes the transition point. They've done this before. The Bennetts, the Callahans, the Draper woman who founded that biotech firm. Just watch your back and secure your ownership structures." I thanked her for her concern, but left convinced she was projecting her own experience onto my situation. Jack was different, younger, more progressive in his thinking. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and admiration. Yet her words lingered, and I found myself paying closer attention to the conversations around me. A week later, during dinner with Jack's college friends, I overheard a fragment of conversation when returning from the restroom. "So the Wilson security protocols will be folded into Meridian's infrastructure?" one of the men asked Jack. "Smart. Acquisition strategy, waiting until after marriage and pregnancy." I paused out of sight, heart suddenly racing. "Nothing's finalized," Jack replied in a lowered voice. "But the integration plan is solid. Dad's been preparing the board for the announcement after the baby comes. By then, Jessica will be focused on motherhood and ready for a change." His friend laughed. "Classic Taylor maneuver. Your dad did the same with your mom's family retail chain, right?" I forced myself to breathe normally as I returned to the table, mind racing with implications. That night, I lay awake beside Jack, cataloging other moments that suddenly appeared in a different light, his increased interest in our patent applications, his suggestions about replacing my CFO with someone from my network, his insistence on meeting privately with our largest investors during the last funding round. Rather than confront him immediately with fragmented evidence, I decided to watch and gather information. My training in cybersecurity had taught me the value of comprehensive threat assessment before taking action. I began by securing my personal, digital environment, changing passwords, enabling additional authentication factors on my accounts, and creating separate devices for home and work use. Pregnancy brain, I explained when Jack noticed my new laptop. Thought it would help to have dedicated devices for different purposes so I don't mix things up. Next, I quietly initiated a security audit at SecureFrame, explaining to my executive team that our growing government contracts required enhanced protocols. This allowed me to implement monitoring systems that would flag unusual access patterns or information requests without alerting Jack to my suspicions. The results came faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, our security team identified multiple instances of someone using my credentials to access sensitive company information during hours when I couldn't possibly have been logged in. The access points traced back to a VPN connection associated with Meridian Technologies. My CTO, Maya Patel, brought the findings directly to me rather than filing a formal security incident report. "I thought you should see this privately first," she said, sliding a tablet across my desk with the evidence displayed. "Given the connection to your personal life." The pit in my stomach deepened as I reviewed the logs. Not only had Jack been accessing our systems, but he had been specifically targeting our intellectual property documentation, client contracts, and organizational structure files, precisely the information needed to value and integrate a company for acquisition. "Lock down all access immediately," I instructed Maya. "Revoke and reissue credentials for the entire executive team, citing routine security compliance. And Maya, this stays between us for now." That evening, I initiated phase 2 of my investigation. While Jack was showering, I used a specialized tool developed by SecureFrame to extract deleted calendar entries from his cloud account, a capability designed for corporate forensic investigations that I had never imagined using in my marriage. The recovered data confirmed every fear. Jack had scheduled multiple meetings with Meridian's acquisition team, his father, and their family's legal counsel. The most damning evidence was a recurring calendar entry labeled JW Integration with attached documents that outlined a step-by-step plan to absorb SecureFrame into Meridian Technologies. The timing aligned perfectly with my pregnancy milestones. The first phase of their plan, accessing and evaluating SecureFrame's assets, was already complete. The second phase, preparing legal documents for ownership transfer, was scheduled for completion by my 3rd trimester. The final phase, transition execution, was planned for what they were calling a family celebration event. I froze when I saw Catherine's name as the event organizer for this final phase. The elaborate baby shower she had been insisting on planning suddenly took on a sinister dimension. They weren't just organizing a celebration, they were orchestrating a public setting where social pressure and pregnancy emotions would make it difficult for me to refuse their demands. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Each night as Jack slept beside me, his hand often resting protectively on my growing belly, I laid awake contemplating how the man who had sworn to be my partner was systematically plotting to strip me of everything I had built. The baby would kick, as if sensing my distress, and I would promise our child that I would protect both of us from what was coming. I needed allies and a comprehensive defense strategy. My first confidant was Diane Chen, an attorney who had been my personal legal counsel since before I met Jack. I had purposely kept her separate from SecureFrame's corporate counsel, a decision that now seemed prescient. "Based on what you've shown me," Diane said after reviewing the evidence in her office, well away from any potential surveillance, "they're constructing a classic hostile takeover hidden behind family business restructuring. They're counting on your emotional vulnerability during pregnancy and the public setting to pressure you into complying. What are my options? I asked, one hand resting protectively on my 7-month bump. Legally, you're in a strong position, she assured me. The unauthorized system access alone constitutes corporate espionage. But litigation would be messy, public, and potentially damaging to your company's reputation during a critical growth phase. She leaned forward, her expression serious. There's another approach, one that leverages their own strategy against them. They're planning a public moment of pressure. What if we prepare for that moment with our own countermove? Together, we developed a multi-layered response plan. First, legal protection. Diane prepared divorce papers, temporary restraining orders, and evidence packages documenting Jack's corporate espionage activities, all ready to file at a moment's notice. Second, business continuity. I worked with Maya to implement leadership contingencies and intellectual property protections that would keep Secure Frames secure, regardless of personal upheaval. The third element of our plan required specialized expertise beyond legal and technical measures. Through Secure Frames' network of security professionals, I connected with Rohan Kapoor, founder of Eclipse Security and a former military intelligence specialist who had transitioned to corporate and executive protection. What you're describing is both a personal security situation and a corporate defense scenario, Rohan observed during our confidential meeting. The Taylor family is attempting to use social dynamics and emotional pressure as weapons against you. We need to neutralize those advantages. Eclipse Security specialized in discreet protection services for high-profile clients facing unusual threats. Rather than obvious bodyguards, they provided comprehensive security through trained professionals who could blend seamlessly into any environment, from corporate offices to social events. For your baby shower scenario, we would position our people throughout the event in various roles: catering staff, gift handlers, even a few guests if possible, Rohan explained. They would remain completely unobtrusive until needed, activating only on your signal. We spent hours developing a detailed security plan for the baby shower, considering every contingency from Jack's potential reactions to the involvement of his parents. Eclipse would provide 20 personnel operating in various covers, all connected through discrete communication devices and prepared to transition from celebration to extraction on my command. The key is maintaining control of the environment without escalating to confrontation, Rohan emphasized. Our presence alone often prevents situations from deteriorating. People behave differently when they realize they're not operating from a position of power. As the baby shower approached, I maintained a careful performance of blissful ignorance. I exclaimed over Catherine's elaborate plans, expressed appropriate gratitude for her attention to Taylor traditions, and appeared completely focused on preparing for motherhood rather than securing my company. Jack seemed increasingly confident, occasionally making comments that now rang with double meaning. After the baby shower, everything will be different, he would say, rubbing my shoulders. You'll be able to relax knowing everything is taken care of. The morning of the shower, I woke before dawn, my daughter kicking vigorously as if sensing the significance of the day. Jack slept peacefully beside me, unaware that I had spent weeks preparing for this moment of reckoning. I slipped out of bed and stood by our bedroom window, watching the Chicago skyline as the first hints of sunrise reflected off Lake Michigan. Today we take back our future, I whispered to my unborn child, feeling her respond with another kick. By noon, our penthouse had been transformed according to Catherine's exacting specifications. Blue dominated everything, from the flower arrangements to the table settings, despite my repeated mentions that we had chosen not to learn the baby's sex before birth. Catherine had simply patted my hand and said, "Taylor women always know. It's a boy. We haven't had a girl in 3 generations." Eclipse security personnel began arriving at 1 o'clock, integrated among the event staff Catherine had hired. Rohan had coordinated with my household manager to ensure his team members replaced key positions. The bartender, the coat check attendant, the photographer's assistant, and several servers would all be trained security professionals by the eye. Time guests arrived. I retreated to our bedroom to change into the pale blue maternity dress Catherine had selected, fighting a moment of doubt as I studied my reflection. 7 months pregnant, I hardly looked like someone prepared for confrontation. But beneath the soft fabric and rounded belly was the same strategist who had built a cybersecurity empire from nothing. I touched the simple pearl earrings I had chosen to wear, my mother's, not a Taylor family heirloom, and reminded myself of who I was before Jack and who I would continue to be after. By 2 o'clock, the penthouse filled with an odd mixture of guests, my close friends looking somewhat out of place among the predominance of Taylor family associates and business connections. Catherine had insisted on managing the guest list, explaining that baby showers are about family connections, rather than casual friendships. The result was a room where I was surrounded by people who viewed me primarily as Jack's wife, rather than Jessica Wilson, CEO. I circulated among the guests, accepting congratulations and fielding the inevitable questions about whether I would be taking time off or stepping back from my company after the baby arrived. With each invasive inquiry, I smiled and offered non-committal responses while noting which guests seemed particularly invested in my professional future. Catherine orchestrated the event with military precision, moving guests through a series of traditional shower games modified to emphasize Taylor family history. There was a quiz about Taylor family business achievements, a game matching Taylor ancestors to their corporate accomplishments, and even a prediction chart for the baby's future career path, with options ranging from CEO of Taylor Holdings to chairman of Meridian Technologies. No space for Continue's mother's cybersecurity firm, I see, my friend Rachel whispered as we examined the chart. One of my few allies in the room, Rachel had known me since college and viewed the Taylor family dynamics with open skepticism. "Notice anything else about the security here today?" I murmured back. Rachel casually surveyed the room before raising an eyebrow slightly. "Half these servers look like they could bench press Jack and his dad simultaneously. You're doing?" I nodded almost imperceptibly. "Stay close when the gift opening starts. That's when they'll make their move." Catherine announced it was time for refreshments before the special gift presentation. The calculated nature of the event's flow became increasingly obvious. They were creating a celebratory atmosphere, filling the room with goodwill and family sentiment before the moment of confrontation. Classic manipulation tactics designed to maximize social pressure. I accepted a glass of sparkling water from one of the Eclipse security members positioned as a server, our eyes meeting briefly in silent confirmation that everything was in place. Across the room, I could see Jack in conversation with his father and Walter Simmons, the Taylor family's longtime legal counsel who had apparently arrived under the guise of being a family friend rather than in his professional capacity. At precisely 4:30, Catherine clinked her crystal glass for attention. The room quieted as she took center position, her silver-gray hair perfectly styled, and her expression one of practiced warmth that never quite reached her eyes. "Before we continue with our celebrations and the wonderful gifts everyone has brought," she announced, "Jack and his father have a very special presentation for our mother-to-be." This was it, the moment their weeks of planning had been building toward. My heart raced despite my mental preparation, the reality of confronting my husband's betrayal suddenly immediate and unavoidable. I placed a protective hand over my belly, feeling my daughter move as if responding to my elevated pulse. Jack approached from across the room, followed by his father and Simmons. He carried a leather portfolio embossed with the Taylor family crest, his expression one of confident anticipation. In that moment, looking at his familiar face now transformed by calculated intention, I felt a final thread of hope snap inside me. There would be no last-minute revelation that this had all been a misunderstanding. The man I had married was indeed orchestrating my professional destruction under the guise of family unity. As we prepared to welcome the newest member of the Taylor family, Jack began, addressing the room of expectant guests, we wanted to take this opportunity to formalize some arrangements that will secure little Thomas's future. He placed his free hand on my belly without asking permission, having never discussed or agreed upon that name for our child. The room responded with approving murmurs as Jack knelt beside my chair, opening the portfolio to reveal the documents I had already reviewed in their digital form weeks earlier. These papers will bring Secure Frame under the umbrella of Taylor Family Holdings, he explained, voice pitched to carry throughout the room. It's a formality that ensures our business interests are aligned as we become parents, something my father did for my mother and his father before him. He held out an elegant fountain pen, a Taylor family heirloom I recognized from previous family signing ceremonies. His expression was expectant, confident, with just a hint of warning in his eyes that only I could detect. The room had gone silent, all attention focused on this moment of supposed marital unity and tradition. Catherine stood behind Jack, her smile triumphant as she watched what she clearly expected to be my capitulation. The pen felt unnaturally heavy as Jack placed it in my hand. I looked down at the documents, noting the sections highlighting my new advisory role and the complete transfer of voting rights to Jack as family trustee. It's just a formality, Jess, he whispered, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. For the baby's future. I held his gaze for a long moment, memorizing the expression of a man who believed he had orchestrated the perfect takeover. Then I set the pen down beside the documents. I need to use the restroom, I said quietly. The baby is pressing on my bladder. Before anyone could object, I rose with effort from the chair and walked unhurriedly toward our master bedroom. I could feel Catherine's disapproving gaze on my back, could almost hear the whispers beginning as I deviated from their carefully planned script. None of that mattered now. The time for pretense was over. Once inside our bedroom, I locked the door and took several deep breaths to steady myself. Then I sent the text message that would change everything. Execute Phase 1. I took exactly 15 minutes to change out of the blue dress Catherine had selected, replacing it with a black maternity dress I had hidden in the back of my closet. I removed the diamond earrings Jack had given me for our anniversary, and instead put on the simple pearl studs my mother had worn on her wedding day. These small acts of reclamation steadied me for what was to come. When I emerged from the bedroom, the transformation was already underway. Eclipse security personnel had moved from their disguised positions to strategic locations throughout the penthouse. Rohan himself stood near the entrance to the living room, his professional demeanor unmistakable now that he no longer maintained his catering staff cover. Jack looked up from a heated conversation with his father, confusion quickly, turning to alarm as he registered the changed atmosphere. Catherine rushed toward me, her composed facade cracking. Jessica, what is the meaning of this? These people are disrupting our event. This event is over, Catherine, I replied calmly. I'd like all guests to leave now, with the exception of Jack and his parents. You can't just, she began, but Rohan stepped forward. Mrs. Taylor, we are executive security professionals engaged by Mrs. Wilson for her protection. We need to clear this space of all guests immediately. The shocked expressions on the faces of Jack's family members confirmed they had never imagined I would have the foresight or resources to counter their carefully orchestrated plan. As Eclipse personnel efficiently but courteously began escorting confused guests toward the exits, I approached the table where the documents still lay open. Jack moved quickly to intercept me. Jessica, you're making a scene, he hissed, grabbing my arm. Think about what you're doing. 2 security team members immediately flanked us. Sir, please remove your hand from Mrs. Wilson's arm, the woman to my left said firmly. Jack released me, his face flushing with anger and embarrassment. These are private family matters, he said, raising his voice for the benefit of departing guests. My wife is under tremendous stress with the pregnancy. Your wife, I interrupted, my voice steady, has discovered your attempts to access secure company servers, your meetings with competitors, and your plan to use this baby shower as a public setting to pressure me into signing away my company. I picked up the documents and tore them in half, the sound sharp in the now half-empty room. And your wife has filed for divorce as of 9:00 this morning. George Taylor stepped forward, his authoritative presence filling the space between us. Now see here, young lady. The Taylor family has been building businesses for generations. Whatever you think you've discovered has been misconstrued. Jack has only been acting in the best interests of your family unit. Is that why he copied proprietary technology specifications to Meridian servers? I asked calmly. Or why he scheduled meetings with our direct competitors 3 times in the past month? Or perhaps you can explain these emails discussing how to leverage my emotional vulnerability during pregnancy to secure control of Secure Frame's assets? I nodded to Rohan, who produced a tablet displaying the evidence we had compiled. Jack's face went pale as he recognized his own words in the emails displayed on screen. You hacked my accounts, he accused, voice shaking with rage. That's illegal. No, Jack. I implemented security protocols to protect my company from unauthorized access. Access you initiated using stolen credentials. As a cybersecurity CEO, detecting and documenting intrusions is literally my job. Catherine looked between her son and husband, comprehension dawning in her eyes. You idiots, she muttered. You left digital trails? Her immediate grasp of the situation confirmed another suspicion. Catherine had been aware of, if not actively involved in, their plan all along. Mrs. Taylor, Rohan said, addressing Catherine, we have a car waiting to take you and Mr. Taylor Sr. home. Mr. Jack Taylor will be permitted 30 minutes to collect essential personal items before leaving these premises, supervised by our team. All other property matters will be handled through legal channels. This is our home, Jack protested. You can't just throw me out of my own property. The penthouse is owned by J.S. Wilson Holdings, I corrected him. It was never transferred to joint ownership, despite what you may have told your family. Check the property records. The realization of how thoroughly I had prepared washed over Jack's face. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked at me not as an acquisition target or a trophy wife, but as an opponent who had outmaneuvered him completely. As Eclipse Security escorted the elder Taylors toward the door, Jack made one final attempt. The baby, he said, his voice lower now. That's my child, Jessica. You can't keep my son from me. I placed both hands protectively over my belly. I have no intention of keeping this child from having a relationship with their father, I said evenly. But that relationship will be defined by court-ordered visitation and supervised interactions until you demonstrate you can be trusted. And Jack? It's a girl. The shock on his face was the last thing I saw before turning away, signaling the end of both our conversation and our marriage. The court's ruling came as a mixed blessing. While it protected me from Jack's immediate intrusion into the delivery room, it also established a framework for his eventual parental rights that would keep him in my life long after our divorce was finalized. The judge appointed a guardian, ad litem, to represent our unborn daughter's interests, a family court attorney named Miranda Choi, who would evaluate both parents and make recommendations about custody arrangements after the birth. Think of me as your daughter's advocate, not either parent's ally, Miranda explained during our initial meeting in my penthouse, her observant eyes taking in the security personnel stationed discreetly throughout the space. My job is to determine what arrangement will best serve her needs once she arrives. I respected Miranda's professional neutrality, but I also recognized the challenge ahead. The Taylors projected a perfect image of family stability and tradition, while I was a pregnant CEO living under private security protection with a complicated divorce underway. Optics weren't in my favor, even with evidence of Jack's corporate espionage. "I need you to understand something," I told Miranda as she prepared to leave after our 2-hour interview. "This isn't about keeping my daughter from her father or his family. It's about protecting her from people who view relationships as strategic assets to be leveraged. I grew up without that kind of manipulation, and I want the same for her." Miranda's expression revealed nothing, but she paused at the door. "Mrs. Wilson, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen wealthy families use children as pawns in their power struggles more times than I can count. My recommendations will be based on actions, not family names or bank accounts." Her words offered small comfort as I entered the final weeks of pregnancy. The nursery in my penthouse was complete, but looked nothing like the Taylor-approved Blue Wonderland Catherine had envisioned. Instead, I had created a space filled with colors drawn from nature: soft greens, warm yellows, and gentle purples, surrounding a handcrafted wooden crib I had commissioned from a female artisan in Michigan. No Taylor family heirlooms adorned the room. No silver rattles engraved with the family crest. No antique cradle that had allegedly held 5 generations of Taylor firstborns. The nursery reflected my vision for my daughter's future. One where she was free to discover her own identity, rather than having it prescribed by family tradition. The final weeks of pregnancy brought unexpected physical challenges. My blood pressure remained elevated despite medication and rest, eventually leading my obstetrician to recommend induction at 38 weeks. "I don't like the pattern we're seeing," Dr. Winters explained during my last prenatal appointment. "The safest option for both you and the baby is to deliver before complications develop." The decision triggered immediate legal maneuvering. Jack's attorneys filed an emergency motion requesting his presence at the scheduled induction, claiming the medical intervention constituted a planned birth event that differed from the natural labor contemplated in the judge's previous ruling. The judge denied their request with visible frustration at the Taylor legal team's persistent manipulation of the process. The court's previous order regarding Mr. Taylor's absence from the delivery remains in effect regardless of medical necessity for induction, the ruling stated. Mrs. Wilson's right to privacy during medical procedures takes precedence over Mr. Taylor's desire to be present. With this final legal hurdle cleared, I entered Northwestern Memorial Hospital through a private entrance on a cool April morning, accompanied by Rachel, my oldest friend who had volunteered to be my birth partner, and 2 discreet eclipse, security professionals who would maintain a protective perimeter throughout my hospital stay. The labor induction proceeded more rapidly than expected. My daughter seemed as eager to enter the world as I was to meet her, responding to the medication, with immediate and powerful contractions that progressed quickly to active labor. 8 hours after the induction began, Eliza Grace Wilson arrived. 6 pounds, 4 ounces of fierce determination with a full head of dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with unusual focus for a newborn. "She looks like you," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face as she watched me hold my daughter for the first time. "That same expression you get when you're evaluating a complex problem." I laughed through my own tears, studying Eliza's perfect features for any trace of Jack or the Taylor lineage. Perhaps there was something in the shape of her chin or the set of her ears, but in that moment, all I could see was a clean slate, a human being untouched by the complications that had surrounded her entry into the world. The hospital had been briefed on the security protocols, restricting visitor information and implementing special procedures for my room. Despite these precautions, Catherine Taylor somehow managed to send an elaborate floral arrangement with an attached card that read, "Welcoming the newest Taylor. Family is forever." I instructed the nurses to donate the flowers to other patients while keeping the card as evidence of the ongoing boundary violations. Jack made no direct attempt to violate the restraining order, but his presence hovered at the edges of my hospital stay. Nurses mentioned calls from the baby's father requesting updates. Hospital administrators reported inquiries from the Taylor family attorney regarding release timing and procedures. Eclipse Security identified a private investigator monitoring the hospital entrances, presumably hired to report on our eventual departure. Miranda Choi visited on the second day, observing my interactions with Eliza and asking practical questions about my plans for balancing motherhood with my corporate responsibilities. She seemed particularly interested in the support system I had established, the rotating schedule of trusted friends who would assist during the early weeks, the nursery adjacent to my home office, the child care professionals I had interviewed for when I returned to work. Many new mothers underestimate the challenges of those first months, Miranda noted as she watched me nurse Eliza with already established confidence, especially single mothers with demanding careers. "I've built a multinational cybersecurity company from nothing," I replied, stroking Eliza's cheek as she nursed. "I understand complex challenges and the importance of comprehensive support systems. My daughter will never be shortchanged on care or attention, regardless of my work responsibilities." Miranda made notes without comment, but I caught a hint of approval in her expression before she left. The evaluation was ongoing, but I felt I had made a solid first impression as a mother despite the unusual circumstances. We left the hospital, through a service entrance on the third day, transferring quickly to a waiting SUV with privacy glass. Eclipse Security had arranged a decoy departure at the main entrance to divert the private investigator's attention, allowing us to return to the penthouse without being followed. Home took on new meaning with Eliza's arrival. The space that had been my private sanctuary transformed into our shared world, a protected environment where I could begin the journey of motherhood away from Taylor family manipulation. The security protocols that had once felt like necessary impositions now seemed essential safeguards for the tiny person depending entirely on my protection. The first weeks of Eliza's life unfolded in a rhythm of feeding, sleeping, diaper changes, and the constant wonder of watching her discover the world around her. My executive team maintained Secure Frames operations with daily briefings via secure video calls, often conducted with Eliza sleeping against my chest in a soft carrier. "She's already attending executive meetings," Maya joked during one update session. Future CEO material, clearly. These peaceful moments with my daughter and supportive team contrasted sharply with the ongoing legal battles. Jack's attorneys filed motion after motion regarding parental rights, visitation schedules, and access to medical records. Each filing required response and documentation, creating a background drumbeat of stress that intruded on our new family. Routine. The situation escalated when Jack violated the restraining order by appearing unannounced at my building's lobby, attempting to convince the security staff he had scheduled visitation with his daughter. The Eclipse team intercepted him before he could reach the private elevator to my penthouse, but the incident prompted an emergency court hearing. Jack arrived at the hearing with the full weight of Taylor family presence behind him. His parents, seated directly behind the defense table, 3 attorneys flanking him, and a child development expert prepared to testify about the critical bonding period between father and infant that was allegedly being disrupted by the restraining order. I attended with only Diane Chen at my side, leaving Eliza home with Rachel and security. The contrast was deliberate, the Taylors projecting overwhelming force while I presented as a reasonable individual seeking practical solutions rather than confrontation. The judge addressed Jack directly before any testimony began. "Mr. Taylor, the court takes violations of restraining orders extremely seriously. Your appearance at Mrs. Wilson's residence without prior authorization shows a concerning disregard for this court's previous rulings." Jack leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Your Honor, I simply wanted to see my daughter. It's been 3 weeks since her birth, and I have yet to be allowed any contact whatsoever. As her father, I have rights that are being systematically denied." "You also have obligations to follow court orders," the judge responded firmly. "However, the court recognizes that establishing appropriate contact between father and child is in the child's best interest, provided proper safeguards are in place." The resulting compromise established a schedule of supervised visitation at a neutral location. a family center specializing in high-conflict custody situations. Jack would be permitted 2 one-hour visits weekly, supervised by professional staff and without Catherine or George present. The restraining order preventing him from approaching my home or office remained in effect, with the warning that any further violations would result in significant consequences. Jack's face registered disappointment with the limited nature of the visitation, but his attorneys quickly advised him to accept the terms. This was a tactical retreat. Establishing any form of regular access was preferable to continued exclusion, even with restrictions they could fight to remove later. The first supervised visit occurred when Eliza was 4 weeks old. I arrived at the family center with my daughter and a diaper bag containing everything she might need during the hour, accompanied by a single Eclipse security professional who would remain in the waiting area. The center's design prevented direct contact between parents in high-conflict situations, separate entrances, staggered arrival times, and professional staff managing all transitions. Handing my daughter to the center supervisor who would bring her to Jack activated emotions I hadn't fully anticipated. This was the first time since her birth that Eliza would be out of my sight, even if only by a room's distance. The supervisor, a kind-eyed woman named Deborah with decades of experience, seemed to understand my hesitation. "We'll take excellent care of her," she promised, cradling Eliza with practiced ease. "And you'll be able to observe the entire visit through the monitoring system if you choose." I declined the option to watch the interaction, choosing instead to use the hour to review work documents in the private waiting area. Obsessively monitoring Jack's every interaction with our daughter would only feed the anxiety I was determined to manage. The professionals were present to ensure Eliza's safety. I needed to trust the process we had established. When Deborah returned with Eliza exactly 1 hour later, she provided a brief, neutral summary of the visit. Everything went smoothly. Mr. Taylor was appropriate and gentle with her. She fussed briefly around the 40-minute mark, but settled when he walked with her. He asked several questions about her feeding schedule and sleep patterns. I searched Eliza's face for any sign of distress, finding only her usual alert expression as she registered my familiar presence. The rational part of me acknowledged that these supervised interactions were necessary foundations for whatever co-parenting relationship would eventually develop. The protective mother in me wanted to eliminate any Taylor influence from her life entirely. The visit established a pattern that would continue for the coming months. Twice weekly, Eliza spent an hour with Jack under supervision, gradually extending to 90 minutes as she grew older. The family center provided detailed reports documenting each interaction, building a record that would eventually inform more permanent custody arrangements. Jack adhered meticulously to the visitation schedule and requirements, likely aware that any deviation would strengthen my position in the ongoing legal proceedings. His attorneys continued filing motions seeking expanded access and reduced restrictions, but the predictable routine of supervised visitation remained stable, while other aspects of our divorce moved through the courts. My return to Secure Frame's offices came when Eliza was 8 weeks old. I had been actively involved in strategic decisions throughout my maternity leave, but physical presence at headquarters sent an important message to both our team and the industry. Jessica Wilson remained firmly in control despite the personal challenges of the past months. The office had been modified to accommodate my new reality as a working mother. The empty executive suite adjacent to mine had been transformed into a private nursery space, staffed during business hours by Nancy, an experienced nanny with security clearance and early childhood development credentials. This arrangement allowed me to nurse Eliza between meetings and spend time with her throughout the day while maintaining my full executive responsibilities. My first day back included a company-wide town hall where I addressed the elephant in the room directly. As many of you know, my personal life has experienced significant changes recently. I want to assure everyone that these changes have only strengthened my commitment to Secure Frame's mission and our collective future. The security protocols we've implemented internally were necessary and have ultimately improved our overall Protection posture. I'm grateful for the executive team's exceptional leadership during my partial absence, and I'm excited to be fully back as we enter this next growth phase. The response from our team was overwhelmingly supportive. Many employees had only heard rumors about the situation with Jack and the Taylors. My straightforward acknowledgement without melodramatic details helped refocus attention on our business objectives rather than my personal drama. This professional stability contrasted sharply with the ongoing legal complexities. Jack's attorneys had shifted strategy, moving away from claims on Secure Frame itself, which had proven legally untenable given the documented corporate espionage, and focusing entirely on financial settlement and custody arrangements. Their latest proposal offered to drop all claims related to the company in exchange for what they termed a fair marital asset division of $40 million, plus a significant custody share once Eliza reached age 2. The figure represented roughly 20% of my personal net worth, far less than their initial demands, but still an extraordinary amount given our short marriage and Jack's lack of contribution to my business success. It's a starting point for serious negotiation, Diane explained as we reviewed the offer. They've finally accepted that Secure Frame is off the table. Now they're establishing an anchor point for financial settlement while dangling future custody modifications as incentive. The custody aspect concerned me more than the money. The proposal included language about transitioning to equal parenting time after Eliza's second birthday, with specific provisions for holiday distributions, education decision-making, and regular weekends at the Taylor family's Lake Forest estate. They're playing the long game, I observed. They couldn't secure corporate control, so they're establishing mechanisms to influence the next generation through my daughter. Diane nodded gravely. The Taylors think generationally. They've built their empire by cultivating loyalty and obligation from childhood. From their perspective, even if they've lost this round with you, they can try again with Eliza. This realization strengthened my resolve to establish boundaries that would protect my daughter's independence. We countered with an offer that addressed immediate divorce settlement without committing to future custody changes. Our proposal included reasonable financial terms, a one-time payment that acknowledged the brief marriage without treating Jack as entitled to wealth he hadn't helped create, and continued supervised visitation with a professional assessment before any modifications. Jack rejected the offer within hours, his attorney's response filled with indignation about maternal gatekeeping and financial punishment for pursuing father's rights. The hyperbole highlighted the emotional component driving their approach. This wasn't just about money or even access to Eliza, but about the Taylor family's wounded pride. Our legal stalemate continued through Eliza's first developmental milestones. She rolled over for the first time during a video conference with our European security team. Her first intentional smile happened while Maya was holding her during a strategy session. She began sleeping through the night at 4 months, giving me renewed energy to tackle the complex negotiations that seemed no closer to resolution. The turning point came unexpectedly during a routine supervised visitation when Eliza was 5 months old. Jack arrived for his scheduled time to find me still in the family center's waiting area, delayed by an urgent call with a government client, experiencing a potential security breach. The center's protocols usually prevented parent contact, but the overlapping schedule created an unplanned encounter. "You're working during her visitation time?" Jack asked, genuine curiosity rather than accusation in his voice. "National security situation," I explained briefly, ending the call. "Critical infrastructure protection doesn't follow convenient schedules." Something shifted in his expression, a flash of the respect he had once shown for my professional commitments before marriage had transformed his view of my career into something to be contained and controlled. "How do you balance it?" he asked after a moment. "Running Secure Frame and taking care of her?" The question seemed sincere, lacking the judgmental undertone I had come to expect from any Taylor family communication. Perhaps it was the absence of his parents' influence in that moment, Or maybe the months of seeing me successfully manage both roles had made an impression. The same way any parent balances work and family, I replied, with excellent support systems, clear priorities, and the understanding that both responsibilities matter deeply. The only difference is that I'm not trying to pretend one should replace the other. He nodded slowly, absorbing the implicit criticism of his previous attempts to use motherhood as justification for pushing me out of my company. She's thriving, he acknowledged. Anyone can see that. Whatever you're doing, it's working. This brief, unguarded exchange opened a narrow channel for more practical communication. The following week, Jack's attorney contacted Diane with a significantly revised settlement proposal that separated financial terms from custody arrangements, allowing us to resolve the divorce while continuing the existing visitation structure, with professional evaluation for any future modifications. Something's changed, Diane observed as we reviewed the new offer. This is actually reasonable, still aggressive on the financial side, but the rigid custody demands have been replaced with much more standard language. The shift allowed us to finalize the divorce settlement within weeks, far faster than the years of litigation the Taylor family typically employed in business disputes. Jack received a settlement that reflected the brevity of our marriage while acknowledging his theoretical contributions as a spouse during Secure Frame's continued growth period. In exchange, he relinquished all claims to company ownership or governance and accepted continued supervised visitation with professional assessment for future modifications. Catherine and George Taylor were conspicuously absent from the final settlement meeting, their influence noticeably diminished in the practical resolution Jack ultimately accepted. When the final documents were signed, he lingered briefly after the attorneys departed. "I hope you know I really did love you," he said quietly. "It got complicated when my parents became involved. Their expectations, the family legacy pressures. I lost perspective on what actually mattered." I considered his words carefully, searching for manipulation but finding what appeared to be genuine regret. "Jack, I believe you did love me in your way, but you were willing to sacrifice my life's work to meet your family's expectations. That's not partnership. It's ownership. And I was never going to be owned." He nodded, accepting the assessment without argument. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for how things ended, but for betraying your trust. You deserved better." The apology surprised me, containing none of the qualifications or deflections that had characterized his previous communications. Perhaps the months of consequences, professional, embarrassment, financial settlement, supervised visitation, had finally penetrated the protective bubble of Taylor family privilege. "Eliza deserves better, too," I responded after a moment. "She deserves a father who sees her as a person with her own destiny, not as the next piece in a family legacy game. If you can be that father, there's room for you in her life. If not, the supervision and restrictions will continue indefinitely." It wasn't forgiveness. The wounds were too deep and recent for that. But it was an acknowledgement that our daughter's interests might be served by allowing Jack the opportunity to prove he could respect boundaries and relate to her as an individual rather than a Taylor acquisition. As he left, I felt an unexpected lightness. The months of legal battles, security concerns, and divided attention between newborn care and corporate leadership had created a constant background tension. Finalizing the divorce terms represented the first step toward a new normal where these extraordinary stressors might gradually recede. That evening, sitting in the nursery rocking Eliza before bedtime, I studied her increasingly expressive face. The observant eyes that tracked movement with remarkable focus, the determined set of her mouth when concentrating, the joyful whole-body reaction when she recognized people she loved. At 5 months, her personality was already emerging, distinct and unique. 1 year after the baby shower confrontation, I stood in the gleaming lobby of Secure Frame's expanded headquarters, watching Eliza explore the interactive security exhibit we had created for visiting families. At 17 months old, My daughter moved with the determined focus that had characterized her from birth, methodically testing each component of the child-friendly display that demonstrated basic cybersecurity concepts through tactile experiences. "She's definitely your daughter," commented Maya, who had recently been promoted to Chief Innovation Officer as part of our company's restructuring. "Look at how she's systematically working through each station. Most toddlers would be randomly pushing buttons, but she's actually following the logical sequence." I smiled, watching Eliza successfully complete a simple pattern-matching exercise that triggered a series of colorful lights. She's her own person. That's what matters most to me. The past year had brought transformative growth for both SecureFrame and our small family unit. The company had doubled in size, securing major contracts with international financial institutions and expanding our government cybersecurity division. Our proprietary security protocol had become the industry standard for quantum-resistant encryption, positioning us at the forefront of next-generation digital protection. On the personal front, the structured visitation arrangement with Jack had evolved into something unexpectedly functional. After 6 months of supervised visits, the Family Center's professional staff had recommended a gradual transition to unsupervised time, first for a few hours at Jack's downtown apartment, then extending to include occasional overnight stays, as Eliza approached her first birthday. Jack had surprised everyone by demonstrating consistent, appropriate parenting skills and respecting the boundaries we had established. He attended parenting classes, consulted with child development specialists, and maintained the visitation schedule with meticulous reliability. Most significantly, he had created a clear separation between his time with Eliza and his parents' influence, establishing his own parenting approach rather than defaulting to Taylor family traditions. Catherine and George had been permitted only limited, supervised contact with their granddaughter, quarterly visits that occurred at the family center under professional observation. These restrictions remained in place by mutual agreement after Catherine attempted to arrange a formal photo shoot of Eliza in traditional Taylor Air attire during one of the early supervised interactions. "Mrs. Taylor, we've discussed the importance of respecting Jessica's parental authority regarding photographs and public presentation of Eliza," the supervisor had intervened when Catherine produced the hand-embroidered outfit and professional photographer she had somehow smuggled into the center. "This is a family tradition," Catherine had protested. "Every Taylor child has formal portraits in this christening gown. It's been in our family for generations." "Eliza is not being christened," I stated firmly. "And any traditions involving my daughter require my prior approval." The incident reinforced the necessary boundaries between the Taylor family influence and Eliza's development. Jack, to his credit, had supported these limitations on his parents' involvement, acknowledging that their controlling tendencies had contributed significantly to our marriage's collapse. "My parents mean well, but they can't help trying to mold everyone into their vision of what a Taylor should be," he explained during one of our co-parenting discussions. "I don't want Eliza growing up with that kind of pressure. I lived with it my entire life, and it nearly cost me everything that actually matters." This evolution in Jack's perspective had allowed us to develop a workable co-parenting relationship focused on Eliza's well-being rather than Taylor family expectations or lingering divorce resentments. We maintained separate households and distinct parenting styles, but communicated regularly about developmental milestones, health concerns, and schedule coordination. The security concerns that had dominated Eliza's early months gradually receded, as Jack demonstrated his commitment to our established boundaries. Eclipse Security maintained a modified protection protocol, no longer the intensive surveillance of the immediate post-divorce period, but a measured approach that acknowledged the ongoing interest of a powerful family while allowing for normal, daily activities. "Your threat profile has stabilized significantly," Rohan had explained during our most recent security assessment. "Jack has established a pattern of responsible behavior, and the Taylor family appears to have accepted the current arrangements. We can scale back to standard executive protection levels while maintaining vigilance for any changes in the situation." This relative stability had allowed me to refocus my energy on Secure Frame's ambitious expansion plans. The company had outgrown our original offices, necessitating the move to a purpose-built headquarters designed with both security and family needs in mind. The new facility included not only state-of-the-art labs and collaborative workspaces, but also a comprehensive childcare center available to all employees, a benefit inspired by my own experience balancing executive leadership with new motherhood. The Wilson model had become shorthand in tech industry publications for our approach to supporting working parents. The on-site childcare facility, flexible scheduling options, and parent-friendly meeting policies had attracted exceptional talent who might otherwise have left the industry during their family-building years. Our retention rates outperformed industry standards by significant margins, particularly among women in technical roles. "You've created something revolutionary here," observed Elaine Winters during her visit to tour the new headquarters. The woman who had once warned me about the tailor's tactics had become both friend and informal advisor in the intervening years. And not just in cybersecurity innovation. This entire corporate structure challenges how tech companies have traditionally operated. "Necessity driving invention," I replied as we watched children playing in the secure outdoor area adjacent to the childcare center. I needed to create an environment where I could be both CEO and mother, without sacrificing either role. It turned out a lot of other talented people needed the same thing. The success of this integrated approach had prompted inquiries from other companies seeking to implement similar models. In response, I had established the Wilson Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing workplace policies that supported family integration rather than forcing a binary choice between career advancement and active parenting. The Foundation has received implementation requests from 23 major corporations since the Forbes profile last month, reported Amara Johnson, the Foundation's executive director, during our weekly update. The waiting list for consultation services extends into next year, and the policy template downloads have exceeded 10,000. This unexpected outgrowth of my personal experience had become a passion project alongside my Secure Frame responsibilities. The Foundation's work addressed the systemic barriers I had encountered, not just the overt opposition from the Taylor family, but the subtle assumptions throughout business culture that motherhood necessitated professional compromise. "We're not just helping individual parents," I explained during a panel discussion at a Women in Technology conference. "We're demonstrating that companies thrive when they accommodate the full humanity of their employees. The talent retention alone justifies the investment, even before considering the innovation benefits of diverse perspectives." The approach had attracted attention beyond corporate circles. Policymakers at both state and federal levels had begun consulting with the Foundation on family leave regulations, childcare infrastructure, and workplace flexibility requirements. What had begun as a personal solution to my unique circumstances was evolving into a movement with potential for broader social impact. This public platform had an unexpected consequence: renewed attention from the Taylor family, particularly Catherine. After months of relative quiet following the supervised visitation incident, she reached out through intermediaries requesting a private meeting. "Mrs. Taylor suggests that your foundation's work aligns with certain philanthropic interests of the Taylor Family Foundation," her assistant explained in the carefully worded email. "She believes there may be opportunities for meaningful collaboration that would benefit both organizations." My initial reaction was skepticism. Catherine's previous interactions had consistently centered on Taylor family control rather than genuine partnership. However, the Foundation's mission required engagement, with influential networks that could amplify its impact. Dismissing potential allies based on personal history would limit our effectiveness. After consulting with both Diane and Rohan about potential legal and security implications, I agreed to meet Catherine at a neutral location, a private dining room at the Chicago Club, where the public setting provided both privacy for conversation and sufficient witnesses to discourage inappropriate behavior. Catherine arrived precisely on time, impeccably dressed in Chanel with her signature pearl necklace. Age had not diminished her commanding presence, though I noticed more lines around her eyes than I remembered from our last encounter. "Jessica, thank you for agreeing to meet," she began after we had ordered tea. "I realize our history creates certain complications." Complications is a diplomatic way to describe attempted corporate theft and manipulation of my pregnancy, I replied, evenly, but I'm willing to hear why you wanted this meeting. Catherine's expression tightened momentarily before she regained her composed demeanor. Direct as always. It's actually one of the qualities I've come to respect about you, despite our differences. She paused, seemingly organizing her thoughts before continuing. I've been following your foundation's work. The policies you're advocating represent significant social change, the kind that requires substantial backing to achieve meaningful implementation. We've secured adequate funding and influential partnerships, I noted. The foundation is exceeding its impact projections for this stage. Yes, I've seen the reports. Impressive work. Catherine set down her teacup precisely. But I'm offering something beyond financial resources. The Taylor Network includes 5 generations of connections across industries, government, and social institutions. That kind of established influence can accelerate policy adoption in ways that new money simply cannot. Her assessment wasn't wrong. Despite the foundation's early success, we had encountered resistance from traditional power structures, the same old guard networks that had initially enabled the Taylors' attempted takeover of SecureFrame. Breaking through those established systems would require either decades of patient relationship building or strategic alliances with insiders who already held influence. Why would you support work that fundamentally challenges the gender dynamics that have benefited the Taylor family for generations? I asked directly. Your family's business model has traditionally relied on absorbing women's professional accomplishments into the Taylor portfolio. Our foundation explicitly opposes that approach. Catherine's answer surprised me with its apparent candor. Because I'm 82 years old, Jessica, I've spent my life working within the constraints of systems I didn't create. At this point, I'm more interested in my granddaughter's future than in preserving outdated traditions. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a small leather-bound book. This was my personal diary from 1962. Before I married George, I was Catherine Ellison, with a degree in economics from Wellesley and ambitions for a career in international finance. My father introduced me to the Taylor family as a potential business connection. 3 months later, I was engaged to George, and my professional aspirations were redirected to supporting the Taylor empire from behind the scenes. The revelation offered a new perspective on Catherine's behavior. Not justification, certainly, but context that complicated my understanding of her motivations. She hadn't merely been enforcing Taylor family traditions, she had been perpetuating the same patterns that had determined her own life path. That's a compelling personal history, I acknowledged. But it doesn't erase what you and your family attempted to do to me and my company. No, it doesn't, Catherine agreed with unexpected directness. And I won't insult your intelligence by claiming I wasn't fully involved in those efforts. The methods were what the Taylor family has always used to consolidate assets and maintain control. They were wrong, both morally and, as you demonstrated quite effectively, strategically. She leaned forward slightly, her posture shifting from social pleasantry to business engagement. What I'm proposing isn't atonement or reconciliation. It's a practical alliance between your innovative vision and my established influence. Your foundation is advocating changes that might have allowed me different choices 60 years ago. I'd like to help ensure those options exist for Eliza's generation, whether or not she carries the Taylor name. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, evolving from cautious mutual assessment to specific discussion of how the Taylor Family Foundation might support the Wilson Foundation's policy initiatives. Catherine demonstrated surprising familiarity with the details of our work, having apparently studied our publications and implementation models extensively. We should start with the paid family leave legislation currently stalled in committee, she suggested, referring to a federal bill our foundation had helped draft. I personally know 7 of the 15 committee members. Their objections aren't ideological so much as practical, concerns about implementation costs and small business impacts. We've developed models addressing those specific issues through tax structure modifications. By the meeting's end, we had outlined preliminary terms for a limited collaboration focused on specific policy objectives where our foundation's interests aligned. The arrangement maintained clear boundaries: no Taylor involvement in the Wilson Foundation's governance or operations, no public co-branding that might suggest a merged identity, and explicit agreement that any collaboration excluded personal matters related to Eliza or Jack. This is a professional relationship between foundations, I emphasized as we prepared to conclude. It doesn't change the parameters of your supervised contact with my daughter or indicate any reconciliation between our families. Catherine nodded, accepting these limitations without argument. Understood. Though I hope that successful professional collaboration might eventually demonstrate that I can respect appropriate boundaries in other contexts as well. As we parted, she added a final observation that lingered with me in the days that followed. You know, in another era, you would have been exactly the kind of woman the Taylors would have tried to marry into the family to gain access to your capabilities. The difference is that you're operating in a time where you had options I never did. That's progress, even if it came too late for some of us. The unexpected alliance with Catherine proved surprisingly effective. Her decades of relationship building among Chicago's elite and within national political circles created pathways for our policy proposals that might otherwise have taken years to develop. The Taylor Family Foundation's endorsement lent credibility with traditional power structures that might have dismissed initiatives from my newer organization. Within 6 months of our initial meeting, the federal family leave legislation had advanced out of committee with bipartisan support. Corporate implementation of our workplace models had accelerated through industry associations, where the Taylor influence helped overcome institutional resistance. Catherine's network provided access to decision-makers across sectors, amplifying the foundation's impact beyond our initial projections. Jack observed these developments with a mix of surprise and cautious approval. During one of our co-parenting exchanges when Eliza was 18 months old, he commented, "My mother seems genuinely invested in your foundation's work. I've never seen her this engaged with something that doesn't directly benefit the Taylor brand." People can surprise you, I acknowledged, watching Eliza explore the playground where we often conducted our transitions between households. Though, I maintain healthy skepticism about long-term intentions. Jack nodded, understanding the caution that would likely always characterize my approach to his family. For what it's worth, I think she's sincere, not out of altruism necessarily, but because she's rethinking her legacy. Having a granddaughter has affected her differently than she expected. This evolution in Catherine's perspective paralleled changes in Jack's own approach to fatherhood. The man who had once viewed his child primarily as a Taylor heir had gradually shifted toward a more individualized relationship with Eliza, adapting his parenting to support her unique personality rather than imposing family expectations. During his parenting time, he introduced her to experiences beyond the privileged bubble of Taylor family traditions, taking her to diverse neighborhoods throughout Chicago, enrolling her in early music classes at a community center rather than exclusive private programs, and reading books that featured characters from various backgrounds and family structures. "I want her world to be bigger than mine was growing up," he explained when I commented on these choices. The Taylor approach was always about exclusivity and separation from ordinary experiences. I see now how limiting that was. This evolution allowed for gradual expansion of Jack's parenting time and responsibilities as Eliza approached her second birthday. The family court professionals who had initially recommended strict supervision now supported a more conventional joint custody arrangement, with Eliza spending alternate weekends and 2 weeknights with her father while maintaining her primary residence with me. The practical implementation of this arrangement required careful coordination given our respective professional responsibilities. Jack had stepped back from his CFO position at Meridian Technologies, transitioning to a venture capital role that offered more flexibility for parenting commitments. I had structured my secure frame leadership to accommodate Eliza's schedule, concentrating intensive work responsibilities during her time with Jack and maintaining a more balanced approach when she was home. The Wilson Foundation had emerged as an unexpected bridge between our separate worlds. Jack had begun providing advisory support for certain foundation initiatives, particularly those focused on engaging fathers in workplace flexibility discussions. His perspective as a male executive who had restructured his career around parenting responsibilities provided valuable insights for corporations struggling to extend family-friendly policies beyond their female employees. Most of these programs are still designed with the assumption that family accommodation is primarily a women's issue, Jack observed during a foundation planning session I had invited him to attend. That perpetuates the same gender imbalance in different packaging. We need to normalize career flexibility for parents regardless of gender. His evolution from attempting to use parenthood to limit my career to advocating for structures that supported all parents' professional development represented perhaps the most profound change since our confrontation 2 years earlier. Whether driven by genuine philosophical growth or simply practical adaptation to our new reality, the shift had created space for a collaborative approach to co-parenting that I had once thought impossible. This emerging equilibrium faced its first significant test when Secure Frame expanded international operations, requiring my presence for extended periods in our new European and Asian offices. The Foundation's growing influence similarly necessitated travel for policy forums and implementation consultations with global partners. I'll need to be in Singapore for 10 days next month, I explained during one of our co-parenting discussions. Then London for a week immediately after. It's the final phase of establishing our international security operations centers. In Chai, our previous reality, such travel requirements would have triggered Taylor family attempts to use my professional obligations as evidence of maternal deficiency. Instead, Jack responded with practical problem-solving. I can adjust my schedule. To have Eliza those 2 weeks, he offered. The Singapore timing actually works well because I'll have just finished the Anderson Fund closing. For London, I might need some support with pickup and drop-off timing because of the board meeting that Wednesday. This matter-of-fact approach to accommodating my professional responsibilities while ensuring Eliza's care needs were met represented the co-parenting relationship I had hoped might eventually develop. Not friendship or reconciliation, but a pragmatic partnership centered on our daughter's well-being rather than power dynamics or competing family agendas. The international expansion proceeded smoothly, establishing Secure Frame's global presence, while demonstrating that executive motherhood and geographic mobility were not mutually exclusive. Eliza adapted to the schedule adjustments with her characteristic resilience, enjoying focused time with each parent while maintaining developmental progress in both households. Upon returning from the international trip, I found an unexpected message from Catherine requesting another meeting, this time with a specific agenda related to both foundation work and family matters. After consulting with Diane about appropriate boundaries, I agreed to meet at the same neutral location as our previous discussion. Catherine arrived accompanied by George, the first time I had seen my former father-in-law since the divorce proceedings. While Catherine had evolved toward practical collaboration, George had maintained distance from both the foundation partnership and any matters related to Eliza. His presence suggested a significant shift in the Taylor family approach. Thank you for meeting with us, Catherine began once we were seated. We have a proposal that crosses both professional and personal domains, So we wanted to address it directly, rather than through intermediaries. George nodded, his expression more subdued than the commanding presence I remembered from our marriage. Catherine has kept me informed about the Foundation collaboration. The results have been impressive, particularly the legislative progress. Their joint proposal proved unexpected in both substance and approach. The Taylor Family Foundation was establishing a major new initiative focused on women's entrepreneurship in technology fields. A $100 million endowment to support female founders facing the same barriers I had encountered building SecureFrame. They proposed naming it the Eliza Wilson Innovation Fund, with governance shared between our foundations but operational control residing primarily with my organization. We've observed the effectiveness of your implementation models through our collaboration, Catherine explained. This fund would extend that approach specifically to address the gender-based obstacles in tech entrepreneurship, with particular emphasis on founders who are also parents. The proposal represented a significant departure from traditional Taylor philanthropy, which had historically focused on established institutions and conventional charitable causes rather than systemic change initiatives. More striking was the explicit recognition of Eliza's maternal lineage in the proposed naming, acknowledging her Wilson identity rather than emphasizing Taylor family connection. Why the Wilson name rather than Taylor? I asked directly. And why Eliza specifically? George answered with unexpected candor. Because legacy isn't just about continuing what came before. It's about learning from mistakes and creating something better. The Taylor approach to business and family failed spectacularly when applied to you and your company. That failure revealed fundamental flaws in our traditions. He glanced at Catherine before continuing. We spent 60 years building a family empire based on certain principles about hierarchy, control, and appropriate roles. Then watched a new model, your model, demonstrate superior results in less than a decade. At our age, there's value in acknowledging when someone has built something more effective than your own lifetime of work. Catherine added, naming it. For Eliza honors both her connection to innovation through you and acknowledges that her future will be shaped by different values than those that defined the Taylor legacy for previous generations. It's simultaneously recognition of what you've built and commitment to supporting others following similar paths. The proposal included detailed governance structures that maintained appropriate separation between foundation activities and personal family matters. The fund would operate with independent leadership, transparent metrics, and strict conflict of interest provisions preventing Taylor business interests from influencing investment decisions or recipient selection. After extensive review with legal and financial advisors, I accepted the proposal with specific amendments strengthening the independence provisions and clarifying Eliza's future relationship to the fund. The collaboration would acknowledge her namesake status without creating obligations regarding her eventual involvement, ensuring she remained free to determine her own relationship to both family legacies as she matured. The Eliza Wilson Innovation Fund launched 6 months later with significant media attention and immediate impact in the technology startup ecosystem. Its first investment cycle supported 27 women-led technology ventures, providing not just financial backing, but structured support addressing the specific challenges facing female founders, balancing company building with family responsibilities. At the launch event, held appropriately at SecureFrame's headquarters rather than a Taylor family venue, I watched Catherine interact with the fund's first cohort of entrepreneurs. Her engagement with these young women reflected genuine interest in their innovations, rather than the controlling assessment I had experienced during our early relationship. Whether motivated by legacy concerns, genuine philosophical evolution, or simply pragmatic adaptation to changing social norms, her approach had undeniably shifted. Jack attended the launch in his capacity as a foundation advisor rather than as a Taylor family representative. The distinction was subtle but meaningful, defining his identity through his contributions rather than merely his family name. As We stood watching Eliza explore the interactive technology demonstrations created for children attending the event. He commented quietly, "This isn't how I imagined our future when we first met, but I think it might actually be better than what I had planned." The observation captured the unexpected journey from attempted corporate takeover to collaborative co-parenting and aligned professional purpose. Not reconciliation or reunion, but a different model of family connection centered on shared commitment to Eliza's well-being and values that transcended traditional power dynamics. As Eliza approached her second birthday, the milestone that had once featured prominently in the Taylor family's original custody strategy, I reflected on the transformation of both personal circumstances and professional impact since that fateful baby shower. The security team that had executed my counter-strategy had not just preserved my company and personal autonomy, but created space for an entirely new approach to balancing executive leadership with maternal responsibilities. Eliza's second birthday celebration embodied everything the baby shower had not been: authentic, collaborative, and centered on her unique personality rather than family tradition. We held it at the Lincoln Park Zoo's Conservation Center, honoring her fascination with animals that had emerged over recent months. The guest list included friends and caregivers from both households, secure frame colleagues who had become extended family, and a carefully curated selection of relatives who had demonstrated respect for our co-parenting boundaries. Catherine and George attended for a brief scheduled appearance, bringing a thoughtfully chosen gift, a child-sized microscope and nature collection kit, rather than the Taylor family heirlooms they might once have insisted upon. They interacted, with Eliza appropriately, following her lead as she excitedly showed them the penguin habitat, and departed without drama when their designated time concluded. "They've actually learned," Jack observed with mild surprise as we watched his parents leave. "2 years ago, my mother would have brought a photographer and formal party clothes." "People can evolve when properly motivated," I replied, watching. Eliza happily returned to examining a touch tank with ocean creatures. "You certainly have." It was true. The man who had once attempted to leverage my pregnancy to seize control of my company had transformed into a father who prioritized his daughter's well-being over family legacy concerns. Jack maintained his Taylor family connections but established clear boundaries regarding Eliza, consistently supporting my parental authority and our shared decisions about her upbringing. His professional path had evolved as well. After stepping back from Meridian Technologies, Jack had established a venture fund specifically supporting underrepresented founders in the tech ecosystem. The work represented both atonement for his previous actions and genuine commitment to changing the systems that had enabled those behaviors. "I spent 30 years benefiting from structural advantages I didn't earn or even recognize," he explained when launching the fund. "Now I'm using that same privilege to help dismantle barriers for entrepreneurs who've had to fight twice as hard for half the opportunity." This evolution allowed us to gradually build something neither of us had initially imagined possible: a functional co-parenting relationship based on mutual respect rather than power struggles. We maintained separate households and distinct lives, but coordinated effectively around Eliza's needs, communicating directly rather than through attorneys or intermediaries as her development progressed. As Eliza grew from toddlerhood into early childhood, her personality continued emerging, determined, observant, and intensely curious about how things worked. At 3, she disassembled a tablet computer with remarkable precision before either of us realized what she was doing. At 4, she created elaborate systems for organizing her growing collection of books and scientific specimens, developing her own classification methods that blended traditional categories with intuitive connections, meaningful to her developing mind. "She's inherited your analytical thinking," Jack noted during a parent-teacher conference at her Montessori preschool. "The way she methodically works through problems is exactly how you approach security challenges." "And she has your social intelligence," I acknowledged. "Watch how she's already reading the room and adapting her approach to different teachers and children." That's all you. This ability to recognize our respective contributions to Eliza's development represented significant growth from the adversarial positions that had characterized our divorce. We had gradually learned to appreciate the complementary strengths we each brought to parenting, without the competitive undertones that had undermined our marriage. The journey toward this equilibrium hadn't been without challenges. When Eliza was 3, Catherine had attempted to enroll her in the exclusive preschool program traditionally attended by Taylor children, arranging an interview without consulting either of us. The boundary violation had necessitated another formal restriction period before supervised visits could resume. Your mother needs to understand that these decisions belong exclusively to Jack and me, I had explained to Jack after the incident. Any attempt to circumvent our parental authority will result in reduced access. Jack had not only supported this position, but personally delivered the message to his parents, demonstrating his commitment to our established boundaries. My relationship with Eliza is not conditional on your acceptance of Jessica's parental authority, he had informed them. If you force me to choose between indulging your control issues and maintaining healthy involvement in my daughter's life, I will choose my daughter every time. This unified approach gradually produced results. Catherine and George adapted to the parameters we established, learning that cooperation within boundaries allowed for greater involvement than continued attempts at control. By Eliza's 5th birthday, they had earned expanded visitation privileges, including occasional afternoons at their Lake Forest estate under Jack's supervision. The professional dimensions of our interconnected lives evolved alongside these personal adjustments. The Eliza Wilson Innovation Fund expanded beyond its initial focus to address systemic barriers for underrepresented founders across the technology sector. Its success attracted additional partners and resources, creating an ecosystem of support that extended well beyond what either the Wilson or Taylor Foundations could have achieved independently. SecureFrame continued its growth trajectory, establishing itself as the global leader in next-generation cybersecurity solutions. Our approach to integrated family support became as much a part of the company's reputation as our technical innovations, with other organizations routinely benchmarking their policies against what industry publications had dubbed the SecureFrame standard for working parents. The model extended beyond accommodating existing family responsibilities to actively supporting family formation choices. When Maya announced her pregnancy through surrogacy, our established systems ensured she could maintain her crucial innovation leadership while adapting to parenthood. When our chief financial officer adopted siblings from foster care, the transition, support mechanisms we had pioneered for biological parents proved equally effective for his family's unique needs. You've normalized the integration of family and executive leadership in ways that simply didn't exist 5 years ago, observed the Harvard Business Review journalist interviewing me for their Transforming Work special edition. What prompted this innovative approach? The question offered an opportunity to reflect on the journey from crisis to systemic change. Necessity, I answered honestly. When faced with the false choice between my company and my child, I refused both alternatives and created a third path. The systems we've built simply institutionalize that refusal to accept outdated limitations. The interview coincided with another significant milestone, Eliza's first day of kindergarten. Jack and I had jointly selected a progressive independent school that balanced academic excellence with emphasis on creativity and social intelligence development. The decision represented another area where our co-parenting approach had evolved from potential conflict to collaborative problem-solving. I initially assumed she should attend Lakeside Academy like Taylor children have for generations, Jack acknowledged during our school selection process. But their rigid academic tracking and emphasis on legacy connections wouldn't serve her specific strengths. She needs space to develop her own approach to learning. This willingness to prioritize Eliza's individual needs over family tradition extended to other aspects of her development. When she displayed remarkable aptitude for computational thinking, We enrolled her in specialized STEM programs that nurtured these talents. When she simultaneously showed artistic inclinations through elaborate drawings of imagined technology systems, we added art education that integrated with her technical interests, rather than treating creativity as separate from analytical thinking. "She's developing a synthesis of our different strengths," Jack observed, as we watched Eliza present her kindergarten science project, an imaginative but surprisingly sophisticated model of electronic security systems for animals to protect their habitats. "The technical precision comes from you, but there's a creative approach to problem-solving that I recognize from my Better Business innovations." These shared observations about our daughter's development gradually transformed the emotional landscape between us, not toward reconciliation or romantic reconnection, but toward something equally valuable: genuine appreciation for the complementary contributions we each made to Eliza's life. The recognition that both Taylor and Wilson influences, when properly balanced and bounded, enriched her experience rather than creating conflict. This evolution enabled pragmatic cooperation in areas that would have once generated tension. When Secure Frame's rapid Asian expansion required my extended presence in Singapore for 3 months, Jack adjusted his schedule to maintain stability for Eliza, temporarily moving into the guest suite of my Chicago penthouse rather than disrupting her routine with location changes. "It makes more practical sense than shuttling her between households during an already transitional time," he explained when proposing the arrangement. "She keeps her familiar environment and schedule while you're establishing the international operations. We can manage the adult awkwardness for the sake of her stability." The temporary household merger demonstrated how completely our priorities had shifted from power struggles to functional co-parenting. Jack respected my home's established routines, maintained appropriate boundaries within the shared space, and coordinated with the security team that still provided modified protection for our family. When I returned from Singapore, he transitioned back to his separate residence without drama, having established a successful precedent for flexible arrangements during future international work requirements. This practical cooperation extended to navigating the complexities of our evolving personal lives. When Jack began dating Caroline Hansen, an environmental attorney he had met through his venture fund's sustainability initiatives, we established transparent communication about how and when to introduce her to Eliza's life. "I'd like to wait until we've been together 6 months before any introduction," Jack proposed during a co-parenting discussion, "and then start with casual group activities rather than presenting her as a significant figure immediately." His thoughtful approach acknowledged both Eliza's need for relationship stability and my reasonable concerns about new influences in her life. When the introduction eventually occurred, a casual afternoon at the Lincoln Park Conservatory where Eliza could interact naturally without forced intimacy, I appreciated Jack's patience in building this new relationship layer mindfully rather than rushing integration. My own personal life had evolved more slowly, with professional commitments and Eliza's needs taking priority during the initial post-divorce years. When I eventually began dating Daniel Chen, a cybersecurity ethics professor whose work intersected with Secure Frame's government contracts, I applied the same measured approach to integrating him into Eliza's world. "She has a strong relationship with her father," I explained to Daniel when discussing timing. "Any new significant relationship needs to supplement rather than compete with that connection." Daniel's understanding of these boundaries reflected the values alignment that had attracted me to him initially. Unlike Jack, who had needed to evolve beyond Taylor family expectations, Daniel came from a background that already prioritized collaborative family models and respected children's autonomy within appropriate developmental frameworks. Blended. "Family dynamics require patience and intentionality," he observed after meeting Eliza for the first time during a museum outing. "Especially with a child as perceptive as your daughter. She's evaluating me quite thoroughly for compatibility with her existing family system." This accurate assessment of Eliza's processing demonstrated why he eventually integrated successfully into our lives. Rather than attempting to establish authority or impose connection, he earned her trust gradually through consistent respect for established boundaries and genuine interest in her developing perspectives. The evolution of these new relationship dynamics coincided with significant professional transitions. As Secure Frame completed its 5th consecutive year of double-digit growth, the board proposed a corporate restructuring that would allow me to focus on strategic innovation while delegating operational management to our exceptionally capable executive team. "You've built something revolutionary," noted Amara Johnson, who had transitioned from the Wilson Foundation to Secure Frame's board of directors. "The next phase requires institutionalizing your vision beyond your personal leadership. This restructuring creates sustainability while freeing you to focus on next horizon innovation and policy impact." The transition to executive chairwoman meant reduced day-to-day operational responsibilities while maintaining strategic direction and external relationship management. The shift created space for expanded foundation work addressing systemic barriers for women in technology leadership, particularly focusing on the challenges facing working mothers in executive roles. This professional evolution paralleled Eliza's development as she completed kindergarten and entered 1st grade. At 6, she demonstrated remarkable integration of technical aptitude and creative thinking, designing simple applications with the child-friendly coding program Jack had introduced, while simultaneously creating elaborate illustrated stories about the characters in her virtual worlds. "She's developing her own unique synthesis," observed her 1st-grade teacher during a parent conference. "I've never seen a child so seamlessly blend computational thinking with narrative creativity. She doesn't see technology and imagination as separate domains." This integration reflected the balanced influences in her life: technical precision from my example, creative approach to relationships from Jack, ethical considerations from Daniel's influence, and growing self-determination as her own person independent from any of our expectations. The daughter we had once feared would become a battleground between competing family visions was instead developing a truly original identity that incorporated multiple positive influences while remaining distinctly herself. On the evening of her 6th birthday, 4 years after the baby shower confrontation that had changed everything, I found a moment of quiet reflection on the balcony of our home while celebration continued inside. Eliza was engaged in animated conversation with both her fathers, Jack showing her how to use the advanced microscope they had given her as a joint gift, while Daniel helped her document observations in the lab journal he had created for her growing collection of specimens. Catherine and George observed this interaction from across the room, their presence now a managed part of family celebrations, rather than a source of tension. They had earned this integration through consistent respect for boundaries and genuine adaptation to our co-parenting approach. While our history could never be erased, we had collectively created a functional ecosystem around Eliza that prioritized her well-being over power dynamics. Looking at this gathered community, biological connections, chosen family, professional colleagues, and friends who had supported us through dramatic transitions, I reflected on the journey from that moment when Jack had slid legal documents across the baby shower table, expecting my capitulation to tailor family expectations. The security team that had changed everything that day had created space for this entirely different future to emerge. The pen had felt so heavy in my hand that day, weighted with implications of surrender and constraint. By refusing to sign, by walking away and implementing my carefully prepared counter-strategy, I had not only preserved my company and autonomy, but created possibility for this unexpected evolution. Not reconciliation or forgiveness necessarily, but something equally valuable. A collaborative approach to raising our daughter that incorporated the best elements each of us could contribute while respecting essential boundaries. Eclipse security. Still maintained modified protection protocols for our family. The visible presence reduced but background vigilance continuing as appropriate for a high-profile technology executive. Rohan had transitioned from crisis security provider to trusted advisor, his firm now handling protection for the entire Secure Frame executive team and implementing specialized protocols for the female founders supported by our innovation fund. The best security is the kind that enables rather than restricts, Rohan had observed during our most recent review. We've evolved from crisis management to creating protected space for positive development. That's the measure of successful security strategy. This evolution from crisis to stability characterized every aspect of the journey since that confrontational baby shower. The security team had indeed changed everything, not by maintaining permanent crisis posture, but by creating safe space for genuine transformation. What had begun as protection against active threats had evolved into structures supporting growth, development, and unexpected collaboration. As I rejoined the birthday celebration, Eliza rushed over to show me a specimen she had discovered in the garden, an unusual butterfly with asymmetrical wing patterns that had captured her scientific curiosity. Her detailed observations and thoughtful questions reflected the confident, inquisitive person she was becoming, shaped by the diverse influences in her life, but fundamentally self-directed in her exploration. "Mom, look what I found," she exclaimed, carefully holding the container where she had temporarily placed the butterfly for observation before release. "It's not in any of my books. Daniel thinks it might be a rare mutation. Jack says we should document it properly and send the information to the conservatory scientists." In her excited voice, I heard the future, not just her development, but the continuation of a fundamental shift in how family, work, and personal autonomy could be integrated rather than positioned as competing forces. The security team had changed everything that day at the baby shower, creating protected space for this new reality to emerge from confrontation. The butterfly spread its asymmetrical wings within the observation container, preparing for release back into the garden. Eliza had already documented its unique characteristics, capturing both scientific data and artistic rendering of its unusual patterns. She understood instinctively that observation need not mean captivity, that the appropriate response to discovering something remarkable was to study it respectfully before allowing its continued freedom. "Ready to release it?" I asked, watching. Her face light up with anticipation. "Yes," she nodded decisively. "I've learned what I needed to know. Now it should be free to go wherever it wants." Together we stepped onto the balcony, opening the container to allow the butterfly's departure. It hesitated briefly on Eliza's finger before taking flight, its unusual wings carrying it upward into possibilities neither of us could predict. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.